Hello there, Ian here, and great to be with you once again. I really hope that this message finds you well. And today we're going to be talking about one of the most important leadership skills you can develop to help accelerate your business performance and help you in many other aspects of your life too. And to introduce this topic, I'd like to go back, way back to a conversation I was having with a very good friend of mine. And if he listens to this video or reads the article below, he may work out who he is. And the conversation has stuck with me for many years. And it went something like this. My friend was working in a large company and he was visited by a senior manager. Now, I don't know how high above my friend the manager was in seniority, but I'm betting he was probably at least his boss's boss, or even his boss's boss's boss. I don't know, but a senior figure in the company. And my friend recounts a conversation that they had, and I say conversation in quotes because my friend did most of the talking. And he said, this guy, this senior manager, he's a master at silence. He comes down, he asks me a question, and then I'm telling him everything. I answer his question and then give him a whole load of information more that he didn't ask for, but I found I was trying to fill the silence with what I was working on, how it was going, and all kinds of other information. He's a master of silence. And as it happens, I actually knew the senior manager in question on a personal basis outside. He was actually a friend of the family. And I know he was an extremely successful manager. So what is the skill that I'm talking about? And you may have guessed it by now. It is, of course, the skill of listening. Now, hearing is the first sense to develop when we're in the womb. A fetus can hear its mother's heartbeat as well as a lot of other sounds outside. So it's a very early sense to be developed. And it's the last sense to leave us as we pass on. So you may be thinking, hang on a minute, I am listening all the time. Why are we talking about it being a specific skill? Here's a bit of research for you. Now, by the way, this research is about doctors. I know many doctors and medical practitioners personally, and they do a very difficult job, often in very difficult circumstances. So hats off to all of our friends in the medical profession. But this bit of research says that despite the need for information when we're doing a diagnosis, that the best way to give an accurate diagnosis is to listen to the patient and what the patient has to say about his or her symptoms. It's one of the most important things in the diagnosis. Despite the importance of listening to a patient explain their symptoms, doctors on average are interrupting their patients after 18 seconds. That's not near enough to get the full picture of what a patient is trying to tell us, unless the patient is a doctor themselves and can exactly explain what their symptoms are in concise terms. Most of us are not. So even doctors, despite the fact that it's a crucial avenue of information, are interrupting patients after 18 seconds. How often are we interrupting people that are talking to us? When we go for a networking event or we are talking to somebody new, how accurately are we listening to what the other person is actually saying? I've got a great example here, and his name is Captain Abrashoff. And he was the captain of the USS guided missile destroyer, the USS Benfold. And it was a fantastic story of last to first in the US Navy's ratings. And they came out top of the US Navy ratings. And one of the major skills that he said led him and the ship to perform so well was his ability to listen. And he learnt it from a former defense secretary. He was a widely loved and admired guy, and Abrashoff said, I really want to emulate that guy. And the one thing that he said, stood out, everyone in his presence really felt like they were the only person right there in that conversation. Listening is a skill that we need to develop. And by the way, we typically suffer from two things when we listen. One, of course, is distraction. Our brain is essentially designed to protect us from threats. So in an office, there's no threats around, but you can't turn your brain off. It's constantly looking for things that might be a threat to us. It's constantly polling the environment for potential threats. But that means that it alerts us to all kinds of things, a buzzing phone, someone talking next to us. It's constantly bombarding us with information. So that's the first thing that we get distracted by. The second thing is most of us are listening, but we're trying to think of our next comment. This cuts the brain off. We're not very good at multitasking. This cuts the brain off from really focusing on what the person is saying. We're trying to think of the next witty comment or anecdote or thinking of our next question instead of really listening. And what Captain Abrashoff said, he coined a phrase, aggressive listening. Aggressively listening and capturing exactly what his officers and crewmates were trying to say. So we get distracted and we're trying to think of our next comment, and that short circuits our listening ability. It really is the mark of ultimate respect when you are listening to someone. Now often we ask questions, but we don't really listen for the answers. And that means that often good ideas get missed. And we show our teammates disrespect when we go back to them and say, what were you saying before? And also listening gets bundled together with a group of skills we call soft skills. This is not a soft skill. It's crucial if we really want to get to a new level of leadership. So a couple of quick tips. One, make time for conversations. If someone comes to you in the corridor with something that you are interested in or that you want to learn or is important to somebody else, but you can't have the conversation right then, make time for it. Say, look, I can't talk right now, but come back and see me at this time and we'll have that conversation. So one, make time for it. Number two, make notes. You're thinking, well, make notes about every conversation? Most of them, yes. Take a cue from Richard Branson, who is an avid note taker and kind of a successful business guy. When you take notes, most of the nerve endings, by the way, are in your fingers. So when you're taking notes, one, you're showing respect to the other person, that their ideas really matter. You write them down. Two, it helps you connect with the note because you've also engaged your fingers and those precious nerve endings there. You have a better understanding of their idea. So make time for the conversation. Number two, make notes. Lastly, ask qualifying questions. If you didn't really hear somebody, and by the way, we all miss some things, don't leave the conversation unless you've really understood what the other person was trying to say. And if you do miss something, don't be afraid of saying, oh, look, I'm sorry, I really didn't catch that. Can you explain to me one more time? Because that's showing respect to the other person and demonstrating that their ideas really matter to you and that you want to know what they really meant. So there are a few quick tips, and if you leave a conversation and you're not a little bit drained by the conversation, maybe you haven't paid enough attention. It will pay dividends. It is a great way of demonstrating the worth of your teammates to you, and it will greatly help accelerate your performance. I really do hope that that made sense, and I look forward to sharing with you again soon.